Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Thank you for listening, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com, or via podcast. Joining me in just a few minutes, Dr. Janet Frick, psychology professor and head of the UGA Infant Lab at the University of Georgia. She's been an outspoken faculty member on social media, denouncing the university's response to pro-Palestinian protests and encampments on the UGA campus. It was on that front, as a matter of fact, that we got some of the sternest words I think I've heard from any politician when it comes to student protests on campuses from Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. This from WSB Television Wednesday night.
Today, Governor Brian Kemp warned protesters not to break the law.
And the governor says that he supports suspending or expelling students who do break the law. Channel 2's Richard Elliott continues our live Team 2 coverage of this breaking news live at Emory with why the governor is saying outsiders are at least partially responsible for all these problems.
Can I just point out, by the way, historically speaking, Southern conservatives have been using the outside agitators argument since the beginning of the abolitionist movement heading into the Civil War. Okay, back to WSB Television.
And these are some of the harshest words yet we've heard from Governor Brian Kemp on the campus violence we've seen here at Emory and at campuses all across the state of Georgia.
And we are not going to allow other students, people on campus, or citizens to be disrupted by people that are breaking the law.
In some of the harshest language so far, Governor Brian Kemp condemned the people charged with breaking the law on college campuses across Georgia and praised the response of law enforcement. He's blaming the same people behind the Stop Cop City protests for instigating the unrest.
This is where I have to remind you that the Emory president had to apologize for mischaracterizing that when 20 of the 28 that were arrested on Emory's campus last week were of the Emory community.
And those kind of people, if they break the law, if they spit in officers' faces like we have seen, they are going to have a bad day and they will be put in jail.
Kemp spoke minutes after he signed a number of public safety-related bills into law at the State Public Safety Training Center in Forsyth.
Wait a minute, you're telling me that Georgia has a state public safety training facility where all kinds of jurisdictions could come and, I don't know, have their public safety trained to perform public safety? That's crazy. Isn't that what we're building one in DeKalb County for the city of Atlanta to do and to offer for other jurisdictions to do as well? You mean to tell me the state has one of those? Huh.
Governor Kemp told me he supports suspending or expelling any student caught breaking the law.
I mean, people need to pay the piper. You know, if you've broken the law, if you're damaging property, if you're assaulting, especially police officers, you should have harsh penalties to send a message. We are not going to allow Georgia to become the next Columbia University.
Oh, and in this part, this is my favorite part of the piece, actually.
Governor Kemp reiterated his support for peaceful protests on both sides.
When has he ever been for peaceful protest? When has he ever been for protest at all? When?
But he also said he could not allow campus unrest to disrupt the lives of other students and citizens.
And this is where I point out, by the way, where the encampments were and the protests were being held on the UGA campus. There are nothing but like office buildings around. There are no classrooms anywhere near. There's no way that those protests were disrupting students. And of course, because they were on campus, they weren't disrupting citizens either. Joining me to discuss what's happened not just at the UGA campus, but throughout hundreds of campuses now we've seen throughout the United States is Dr. Janet Frick, who says I should call her Janet, but I'm going to call her Dr. Janet Frick because she worked hard for that doctorate. She is a faculty member at the University of Georgia since 1997. I think I just missed you by 2 years. I'm a 29th year sophomore at UGA, if anybody asks.
I like that.
But anyway, thank you for joining us. A psychology professor there at UGA and also head of the infant lab. Tell me real quick about the infant lab. I'm curious about that.
So I'm in the psychology department, and I'm a developmental psychologist, which means that I study, my particular area is infant development. I study how attention and learning develops in the early months and years of life. And we do a number of studies. We do some in person, some online, some that are done in people's homes, but our research is all about the development of attention and learning. And the cute, very smart, adorable babies of the greater Northeast Georgia area. So it's a lot of fun.
I feel like if I were going to go back to the University of Georgia, I might enroll and go to the veterinary school because I would start the kitten lab. I am a cat guy, and I would.
Oh yes, I have a cat who's wandering around under my feet right now, wondering what I'm doing. So
yeah. Herschel will come by and use a leg of mine as a scratching post soon enough. My cats, by the way, this is how big of a Georgia guy I am. My cats are named Herschel and Dooley. And
that's beautiful.
Yeah, so you totally
I love that.
Yeah. And if there's a third that comes around, I think Kirby is probably next in line. But
Kirby would be a good one. That would be a good way to honor.
So we wanted to talk a bit about the fomenting of a pro-Palestinian movement on the campus of the University of Georgia. Not unlike there are on many college campuses. Here at Emory in Atlanta last week, we saw what became a somewhat violent confrontation between police and students, some non-students, faculty members even. We saw a little taste of this at the University of Georgia as well. You, by the way, having grown up in Missouri, gone to the University of Kansas, you don't strike me as somebody that would just be a coastal liberal elite, elbow patch.
I'm a pretty sensible Midwesterner at heart, and I really, as do many faculty at UGA, I really care about my students, and that is across the political spectrum, across the socioeconomic spectrum. Like, we have students who come from great privilege. We have students who are really struggling to get food each week, and like the student body, of course, I wish that the student body were a bit more diverse and representative of the makeup of our state. But we really do have, we have students from all over the country, really with a broad array of life experiences and perspectives and beliefs. It is just fundamental to, anyone who really cares about academia, cares about higher education, especially a public higher education at a state school like UGA. It is incredibly important that we foster an environment where students are free to speak their mind, to argue for things they're passionate about, and to learn through doing that. I don't know about you, but if I had to pick, a person, if I were to sit down next to a 18 to 22-year-old Janet, I would be like, "What the hell are you talking about?" I didn't ask you. Can I cuss on your show?
Sure, yeah. Hell is fine. Go crazy.
Okay, all right. I'll keep it down. But like any 18 to 22-year-old is going to be passionate about things, and like they are still learning about the world, and that we want to encourage that. So this has been the events at UGA in the past week.
Well, there's definitely been a learning experience of how the world works. I mean, can you not? I mean, that's how the world works. Unfortunately, I mean, it's up to their generation, our generation, those of us who still have the opportunity to impact that change, to change it so that we're not having these violent confrontations, so that we're actually fostering dialogue. I likened. We have a state representative who represents a portion of Athens-Clarke County because that area is so gerrymandered. 3 of your 4 district representatives are Republicans.
All the heck.
Right, yeah. Yep. Houston Gaines essentially just wanted to blanket cite these protesters as anti-Semitic, and I likened it to being a dog that sniffs something he doesn't like and just raising his leg and peeing on it instead of, I don't know, learning something about it. What's wrong with dialogue? I don't understand that. That seems
Houston
to be.
should know better, because Houston was student body president at UGA, and in fact, the year that Houston was student body president in 2017, I was the chair of University Council that year, which is our highest faculty governance body. So Houston and I worked together that year, and he knows that that their beliefs and political protests and all of those things are normal on a college campus. And so that's
So what happens? What happens to great UGA grads like Houston Gaines and Brian Kemp when they get into the political arena and they just find themselves having to pander to the lowest common denominator then?
Well, I can't speak about what it takes to win political elections in Georgia, but I don't feel like I feel like both of them know better in terms of what.
I agree. That's the thing that gets me so irate with Republicans. I feel like the political the ones that are in office, like they actually know better, and I think that they're media allies. I think the Sean Hannitys and the Laura Ingraham, I think they actually know better too, but it's part of an act that they're playing, and they like the audience that they're playing to, voting for them and tuning in and giving them the ratings that they want.
And they could lead to a better place. They could lead the Republican Party to a better place if they were willing to, stand on principle and set an example. So, it's the reaction. I will say, and I knew that this would be the case when I saw that there had been an encampment set up. I've seen some really very harsh reactions to it, and really disproportionate. This is the thing, and this is one of the things that really has troubled me as both a faculty member, and I am also a parent of two current UGA students. I have a son who's graduating next week, and I have a daughter who's finishing up her freshman year.
Go Dogs.
So go Dogs, exactly. They both grew up in Athens and both said they were going to go elsewhere, and then they both ended up going to UGA. Go figure. I did not pressure them anyway. And by the way, faculty do not get any sort of tuition discount.
No break.
It is absolutely none. But students, like if you were to go downtown Athens any Thursday night of the year, you will see that UGA students, they shouldn't defy police. They know the rules. They shouldn't break the rule. I mean, give me a big fat break.
Right.
If we had every student who has a fake ID or who has ever engaged in underage drinking or who has, mouthed off to police and been belligerent, like if all of them were like, let's expel them, it's so disingenuous. So very frustrating.
More with the outspoken Dr. Janet Frick from the University of Georgia when the Ron Show returns. The address is ronshowatl.com, by the way. If you want to catch past episodes of the show, show notes, etc., and so on. If you want to donate to the show, whether it's a cup of coffee, a loaf of bread, lunch, a tank of gas, a $500,000 condo in a high rise in Atlanta, whatever you want to donate, feel free to support the Ron Show at ronshowatl.com. We're with Dr. Janet Frick. She is a psychology professor and head of the University of Georgia's Infant Lab, and we're talking a good bit about the student-led protests on the campus and the university, and for some reason the governor's response to that. As a faculty member, you've been pretty outspoken on social media about the administration's response to these encampments and protesters. We have, 9 students that I believe have been suspended, at least one of which I can remember from an AJC article where she's not even sure she's going to be allowed to graduate.
Right.
Has there been any blowback for you professionally, or has anybody said anything to you about, like, be careful, Janet, you don't want to say too much. You don't want to rock the boat.
Well, I have, that ship has long since sailed because I am known as a person who will speak out. And I don't go looking for things like this, but I don't tiptoe around. I think it is important for faculty to, especially tenured faculty, I do have tenure, to have a voice and not indiscriminately, but like in terms, like in this particular case, I really genuinely feel that there was a different path that could have been taken in a couple of different ways, but especially the choice to suspend them immediately to ban them from campus as we're entering final exam week. A couple of the students lived in campus housing. They were kicked out of campus housing. They were on the meal plan. They were banned from dining halls. That is a draconian response that is completely unnecessary. And that was a choice that, makes no sense. It is incredibly disproportionate to how students who commit other types of infractions are treated, and it's disgusting.
And is there not an appeals process that's supposed to take place? And we've seen from social media reports, I think Patrick Quinn at WANF showed evidence of a student getting an email mere minutes before the deadline to respond.
1 minute before, yes.
I mean,
there is, we have a student code of conduct. These students 100% violated the code of conduct. I don't dispute that whatsoever. We do have policies surrounding our free speech areas. And I have some colleagues who say, like, well, there shouldn't be policies about that. I actually don't agree. I don't have a problem with there being policies because if you have one group that reserves a space to have a demonstration, and then say you have an opposing group that comes in and starts, banging gongs and using noisemakers to disrupt the event, that shouldn't happen. There needs to be, it's okay for there to be some parameters around that.
Sure.
And they, the students, they were engaging in civil disobedience. They knew they were breaking the rules. They were told this is, all of that, that's great. That's fine. That is their, free right to do so. But the policy, the student conduct policy, what would typically happen in a situation like that, even with the fact that they were arrested, which I'll set that aside for a second, in terms of the UGA conduct policy, they, got a letter, you have been found in violation of these. What normally happens is they say, there will be a hearing, we will have a meeting, here's the rules around that, and then, a sanction will be determined. And I'll give you an example of something that happened in 2016. There was a group of students who engaged in another act of civil disobedience. They occupied a building to protest the ban on undocumented students that the Board of Regents put in place, so that undocumented high school graduates who have lived their whole lives in the U.S. essentially couldn't go to UGA and a few other schools. So those students occupied a building. They were arrested, and they all went through the conduct process. None of them were suspended. None of them were banned from campus or going to classes. And over the next few weeks, they went through their process and ended up, one of the young women who was part of that told me that her punishment was writing an essay. And that it's educational. That's how it should be. But to say, like, we're going to ban you from campus and prevent you from taking your final exams, we're going to threaten you with not being able to go to your graduation ceremony, like, it's just a complete escalation that is, just antithetical to what should be let's make this an educational opportunity. Let's have dialogue. Let's model how to dispute things and how to respond to civil disobedience. And, that can be done in a way that's humane and not just incredibly aggressive like this.
And instead, what we saw from the administration and law enforcement all the way up to the governor's office was shut it down, send the cops in, let them get rough if they have to be. As a faculty member, how disturbing was it for you to see images out of Emory University where faculty members were just aghast at seeing how officers were manhandling their students and trying to get the officers' attention to explain what they were doing, to at least stop what they were doing, and then to see that some of those faculty members were being arrested?
Right. As a faculty member, these students, for many of us, we form really close bonds with them. We care about them.
Sure.
We're, all of my entire career, and part of why I really have loved being a faculty member is I love this time of life, getting to be part of this incredibly important time in people's histories. I was just messaging last night, in fact, with a former student took a class from me and worked in my lab, my research lab, back in like 1999, 2000. He is now, I won't say too much because I don't want to identify him, but he's in a very prestigious professional position in Atlanta. I have former students who are doctors, lawyers, like all across the country. And
Sure.
he was messaging me last night because he had seen some of my social media posts, and he is appalled at how this is being handled, and said that it's actually going to affect his giving to the university, because he's so upset with the way that this is being handled. But so all of that to say, as a faculty member, we care about these students. We see them, we celebrate their successes, and I would be watching the videos of the violent arrests. It's extremely disturbing.
We are with Dr. Janet Frick, University of Georgia, professor of psychology and head of the UGA Infant Lab. We'll pick up on that conversation when we return on The Ron Show.
Call or text The Ron Show anytime at 404-919-2725. The Ron Show on America One Radio.
We're with Dr. Janet Frick, psychology professor and head of the University of Georgia's Infant Lab at the University of Georgia. Of course, in recent days, this week and last week, we've seen protests, pro-Palestinian protests, anti-Israeli protests on campuses throughout the United States. University of Georgia in Athens and Emory University here in Atlanta among them. I asked Dr. Frick her visceral response when she saw faculty members on the Emory campus trying to protect and defend their students from police response, I guess we'll call it. And here's what she had to say about that.
I understand the impulse to want to protect and to be like, I'm going to do my best to protect this young person and to try to bring some calm, to try to de-escalate the situation, which is what we would hope to see of, that a violent arrest, that's not the first impulse. That should not be the opening salvo. Let's talk. Can we, resolve this without violence and bullhorns and all of that?
Which is ironic because this all stems from opposition to the war in Gaza, which it was a response to a physical attack on October 7th by Hamas on innocent Israeli citizens whose government has since turned and engaged in a war that has killed tens of thousands of innocent Gaza citizens and injured, hundreds of thousands more. It's like we're not learning that the physical response is not moving the dialogue any further. It's not bringing us any closer to a resolution. And I'm sorry, I'll just say it. I feel as if Israel has decided that the only way to bring peace to themselves is to come as close to wiping Gaza off the face of the earth as possible. It just seems that seems to be the method because they're not really trying to be discriminatory when it comes to their attacks. And this leads to what I think we're seeing on college campuses, where we have young minds who are obviously a little over idealistic. They haven't seen the way the world operates yet. They haven't let cynicism set in like it has for those of us of a certain age. So they have an ideological or an ideal that they would like to see the world in. And so they're frustrated that they can't see that. And they should expect more from their elders, and they're not getting it. And so the response from the elders is more akin to what they stand against because they've seen how it works out in Israel and Gaza. And with Putin and Ukraine and with Republicans and Democrats and January, this is a generation that has grown up under so much division, in their faces almost from the day they were born, 9/11, that they're at a breaking point.
don't underestimate this generation because they, through collective community building and communication through social media, they are much more civically engaged and civically minded. They know so much more about the world than I did when I was 22 years old.
Sure.
I can say that for sure. And yes, they still, of course, see the world in ways that are different than how older people do. But I don't discount their envision a better world than what we have right now. And I refuse to condescend and say like, oh well, just wait till you're older, you'll know. And I know that's not what you were saying, but I have seen that sentiment a lot. Of, like, oh, they this missile, they don't even know what they're advocating for. They don't understand how complex it is. Like a lot of the groups that are advocating in with Palestine, including at UGA, are multi-ethnic, multi-faith coalitions. There were one of my former students was one of the ones who got arrested. He's Jewish. And he's part of this group and is, feels like what's happening is he opposes what's going on. And, I'm not saying, of course, that he speaks for all Jewish people or anything like that. But I'm just saying that I think that the coalition happening on college campuses reflects a needle moving, just like, and, we during the Vietnam War, during sit-ins in the 60s, like young people are sometimes able to imagine a world that their elders can't see yet. And certainly, I mean, I thought the statement from Governor Kemp today was incredibly disappointing. So harsh and hostile in terms of, like if you break the rules, I can't remember the exact wording that he used, but just the harshness of it.
I mean, people need to pay the piper. If you've broken the law, if you're damaging property, if you're assaulting, especially police officers, you should have harsh penalties to send a message. We are not going to allow Georgia to become the next Columbia University.
It's just so disconnected from reality and comes from a position of privilege on his part.
Yeah, it does. And a lack of compassion for
empathy.
Young people, empathy for, I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with every action and every tactic and every sign and all of those things. But I think that UGA says we are where we promote free speech, exchange of ideas, etc. But we all understand the reality that because this particular speech is unpopular, it is being the reactions to it reflect it is not a content neutral reaction that is happening.
We are talking with Dr. Janet Frick, psychology professor at the University of Georgia and head of the UGA Infant Lab. I would actually push back and argue that I don't think that this mindset is necessarily unpopular. Polling is showing that Americans' views on Israel and the Palestinian plight have actually shifted quite a bit, and in the last 6 months. And I think that is why, honestly, this is just my theory. I think this is why we're seeing such an acrimonious pushback from the right and some on the left, and we're seeing broad generalistic terms about anti-Semitism at this is an anti-Semitic or pro-Hamas rally.
Right.
Obviously that's not the case. I don't think you can count on one hand at any of these rallies anyone who is pro-Hamas. That's not the point at all. It's a lumping in of pro-Palestinian is not pro-Hamas any more than anti-Israeli war is being anti-Israel or anti-Semitic.
Right. Yeah. And that distinction has, and of course it's sort of like how, in the pro-life, pro-choice debate, say that, people are pro-killing babies and, like the inflammatory rhetoric. Yeah. Hyperbolic rhetoric is not a new thing, but when it's being ascribed to young people who are, attempting their, to engage in civil protest and to join part of a larger campus movement. It's just, and also, like, I am concerned for the safety of these young students, of them being doxxed or being, having their photos like, oh, these kids are pro-terrorism, and don't hire them. Like, the digital age that we live in, there's the potential for real harm. And then when you have the governor of the state weighing in on what should be a campus disciplinary matter, it's incredibly inappropriate. And I'm sorry that there should be defense of students, whether we agree with every aspect of their tactics or their behavior, etc. Young people are allowed to make decisions and to have the consequences of their choices, to deal with repercussions. But you don't need the governor of the state then giving his opinion that they should be punished harshly. That's incredibly inappropriate.
Well, and to me, it's kerosene on a small fire for one, and for another. What does this teach the students? This doesn't teach them that there is a calm and rational method of dialogue.
Exactly. It's meant to quash dissent, and it's meant to be careful speaking up, because we'll come after you.
Well, and also let's remember, this is the same conservative movement in this country, MAGA culture, Republican Party, whatever you want to call it. This is the same conservative part of the country that was hostile to the idea of stifling dissent if, say, an Ann Coulter wanted to go speak on a college campus and she was drowned out by protesters. This is anti-First Amendment. Well, you can't have it that way and then want to stifle dissent when you don't agree with it on the campuses now.
And, I will say, I have felt in the past that, we do have conservative speakers come to campus. We don't have a history of disruptions. We have conservative groups that have some pretty big name people. I think Donald Trump Jr. came to campus, and it was like so big they moved it downtown to the Classic Center. And it wasn't disrupted. We've had liberal come to campus. Like UGA has not had and I think. And then sometimes there are, counter events or, protest events that don't disrupt the speaker. But that is how we build capacity for being in dialogue with people with whom you disagree. And, so I think the college campuses should be a place where the leaders of campus, the faculty, want to build that type of capacity in that environment, not to promote folks who I started to go off on a tangent.
I kind of feel a sense of where you're going, and I'll give you two examples of where this goes right and where this goes wrong. And obviously, I'm biased because this is a political talk show, and I'm left leaning.
Sure.
But when President Obama gets heckled at a speech, he leans in on it. He leans into it. He lets them have their say, and then he responds, and then he lets his audience back him up. Whereas Donald Trump, if somebody showed up at a rally in his 2016 cycle, get him out of here, kick his ass, yada yada yada. Give him hell. I'll
violence.
I'll make sure your legal fees are paid for. Two totally different, disparate ways of handling dissent, and I think that's just what we've seen kind of come to the front now, where we can't see dissent as an opportunity to listen to dialogue. It's let's go kick their ass. That's not free speech.
Right. Yeah, it's not. And that's it's a quashing of, and just an outright dismissal rather than holding space for, like, I don't agree with this, but this group has the right to express their views, etc.
All right, so we've got just a few more minutes. We're going to wrap this conversation with Dr. Janet Frick, psychology professor and head of the University of Georgia's Infant Lab from the University of Georgia. When the Ron Show returns on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com, or wherever you podcast. Follow the show on your preferred social media platform. That would be at Ron Show ATL, Twitter, X, Instagram, Facebook, Threads. Gosh, I keep forgetting Threads. I'm so sorry. Anyway, we're having a delightful conversation in the aftermath of pro-Palestinian protests and the over-policing, I would say, reaction to that from the university at the University of Georgia. Anyway, Dr. Janet Frick, psychology professor and head of the UGA Infant Lab. We're again at a critical point in 2024, and I it's so hyperbolic to say it, but it's so hard not to see it this way. This could be like the most important election of our lives, and we say that every presidential cycle. But like literally, I feel like democracy's on the line here, and yet you are surrounded by the under 30 voter who just cannot seem to be excited about either candidate, and I totally understand that.
Right.
The Palestinian, the Gaza situation is going to weigh on the young voter pretty heavily, and if we don't see a positive resolution sometime soon, I feel like we're going to lose what would, I think, be an otherwise very engaged voter base for those on the left. Do you see it the same way?
I am very concerned about the issues you're bringing up, and I don't think. Of course, I have a limited number of younger people that I'm around. I don't get the sense that they're really excited about either candidate.
Right.
I think
club.
young people value authenticity. They want people who will talk straight and work for a better world. I certainly have my opinion about which of the available options is a better choice there, but obviously as a faculty member, like what I'm trying to do, I don't in any way promote any. In fact, I work really hard. For example, I teach a class on prenatal development, and I'm very judicious about let's read articles that represent perspectives that are opposed to abortion. Let's and it's a class about all aspects of prenatal development, but we do spend some time on that, and we talk about medical. Anyway, all of that to say, faculty, with some exceptions, of course, but we work hard to make sure we don't want to alienate students who have different and who are figuring out their beliefs. But I think the young people, the young voters of today, they expect more, and I think they should be. This is, I think, where I would go with this in terms of thinking about how can colleges. If our goal is to turn out civically engaged, I want to have civically engaged conservative students. I want to have civically engaged progressive students. Wherever students are coming from, I want them to think about how can I advocate for a better world with the belief, the framework that I support or that I align more with, to how can that be put to improve our society and not just to tear it down and destroy it. And so, in my field, in psychology, I'm trying to teach students about, the factors that influence behavior. I want them to understand how do people who have mental illness, how can we best help them and help them to have productive and meaningful lives and improve our society for them. Just as one example, but on college campuses, we have an opportunity to model engagement, connection, students in classrooms, students who see things differently. Let's talk it through. Let's have opportunities for engaging with each other's arguments in ways that are, productive and beneficial to all. So
and then of course, you can have Governor Brian Kemp send Georgia State Patrol in with batons to just start smacking at kids.
Yeah, and again, that's if we had ever seen that after a football rally where there's property being destroyed
Right.
downtown, I might feel differently. But no, it seems like that only happens in certain situations, doesn't it?
Oh my gosh! If I could tell you about the time that Sid Bream slid into home plate in 1992, and we stormed downtown Athens because the Braves were going to the World Series, and people were climbing lampposts and destroying property.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember too many cops with batons showing up to.
No, I have many students who told me firsthand accounts of things that happened downtown after our national championship wins. And police, state patrols coming in to arrest them was not part of the equation.
Yeah, I don't remember the governor calling folks in. So
No.
one last question I want to ask you. This is totally a different subject, but UGA has been in the news a lot in the last 6 months, and the death of Laken Riley, and you mentioned, the immigration situation the last time we had protests on the campus at UGA and how it was handled
Yes.
differently.
Mm-hmm.
What is the mindset of the student population there in the aftermath of Laken's passing? Can you speak to that in any way? I mean, that had to be just shocking and jarring, and there has to be some sense of confliction.
Yeah. I mean, the death of Laken was an incredible tragedy. It was senseless, awful, absolutely inexcusable. The sense that I have, and I did not talk about it in my classes. It was such a hot potato issue.
Mm-hmm.
My focus in my classes was just sharing mental health resources with students. It was obviously very traumatizing. I taught students who knew her, who had been friends with her, but I had students who are from immigrant families, students who really were extremely upset by the anti-immigrant rhetoric that rose up in response to that. And I tried to speak to all of that in comments I made to class. And I had a couple of students come up who are, themselves not American, and to thank me for just acknowledging that it had been really hard. And they also were just horrified by her death. So I think I can't say broadly what UGA students felt. My own two kids went to public school here in Athens, which is a very diverse, multiracial environment with we have a lot of immigrant students with undocumented parents in our public schools. And they were, I can say that my kids were horrified by the vitriol expressed towards undocumented immigrants in general, so I don't know that I can say anything sort of broad. Obviously there was a lot of very negative reaction, but primarily folks just tried to keep their focus on Laken and her friends and showing support for that incredibly tragic loss.
As someone who lived in Athens for a few years myself, I felt as if I was seeing a microcosm of, I think, what we've experienced since 2016, where we didn't realize there was this underbelly of vitriol that surfaced on the whole in the United States with the ascendancy of Donald Trump. But we also saw that, I lived in Athens for a while. You've lived in Athens for a long while. It's a peaceful college town and a very friendly, hospitable place. But there's an element we may not have been aware of that seems to exist and surround its city limits as well.
Yeah. And I can understand the, incredible anger that people felt at her death. And it's so easy to say, like, this guy shouldn't have been here, and if he hadn't been here, she wouldn't have died. And that, that is technically true, in that sort of very narrow sense. But making this, impugning an entire class of people because this one person, allegedly, he has not been convicted yet, but if that is if they did get the right person, he made committed this horrible crime. But to no more should we impugn his entire, people who share this one characteristic with him than we should impugn all white men when there's a school shooting. It doesn't make sense to say this group of people is awful and violent, and that rhetoric was disturbing to see, for sure.
I want to thank you for joining me, Dr. Janet Frick, psychology professor and head of the UGA Infant Lab. Thank you so much for joining the Ron Show today. I appreciate that.
It's been a pleasure. Great conversation. Thank you, Ron.
Show notes available for each episode at ronshowatl.com. Back tomorrow, 9 to 10 a.m., replaying 5 to 6 p.m. on the America One Radio app and at AmericaOneRadio.com. On demand all day at ProgressiveVoices.com and available wherever you podcast.